While cleaning out the garage, I found my wife's old phone and charged it out of curiosity. Her last voicemail was from my best friend. He'll sign the retirement papers next week. After that, we're finally free of him. Her reply, good. I can't pretend much longer. I said nothing. Acted normal for 74 days. This morning, they both showed up to a locked house and frozen accounts. I'm 54 years old, been married to Carla for 18 years, and my best friend Jake has been like a brother to me since college. We're talking 30 years of friendship here. Camping trips, weddings, barbecues, the whole thing. I work for a mid-sized engineering firm downtown, been there for 22 years. Good job, decent money, and I'm supposed to retire in about 3 years with a pretty solid pension. Nothing fancy, but enough for Carla and me to travel a little, maybe buy a small cabin somewhere. Jake runs his own construction company, and over the years I've helped him out with the engineering side of some bigger projects. Nothing official, just friend helping friend stuff. He'd buy me dinner, I'd look over his blueprints and make sure everything was structurally sound. Last Saturday, Carla asked me to clean out the garage. We'd been talking about converting part of it into a workshop for my retirement hobbies, and she said the clutter was driving her crazy. There's stuff in there from when we moved in, she said, handing me a stack of empty boxes. Most of it is probably junk we should have thrown away years ago. She wasn't wrong. The garage was a disaster. Old Christmas decorations, boxes of books, random furniture we'd never used. I spent most of the morning just sorting through everything, deciding what to keep and what to donate. That's when I found the shoebox wedged behind some paint cans in the back corner. Inside the box was Carla's old phone. Not her current phone, but the one she had maybe 2 years ago before she upgraded. It was one of those cases where she'd gotten a new phone, but kept the old one around just in case, then forgotten about it completely. I almost just threw it in the trash pile, but then I got curious. I remembered that phone had a really good camera, and I thought maybe there were some old photos on there that Carla might want to save. So I brought it inside and plugged it into the charger in our kitchen. Carla was out running errands, and I was making myself a sandwich for lunch when the phone finally powered on. It had been dead for so long that it took about 20 minutes to charge enough to turn on. When it did, the screen lit up with a bunch of old notifications, text messages, missed calls, voicemails. Most of them were from around 2 years ago, right before she'd switched to her new phone. I was scrolling through looking for the photo app when I noticed something weird. There were a lot of calls and messages between Carla and Jake, like a lot, way more than I would have expected. Jake and I are best friends, but he and Carla have always been more like friendly acquaintances. They're nice to each other at parties and family gatherings, but they don't really hang out or talk much when I'm not around, or at least I didn't think they did. I clicked on the voicemail notification, mostly just being nosy about what kinds of messages Carla used to get. The first few were normal stuff. Her dentist confirming an appointment, her sister calling about their mom's birthday, me leaving a message about picking up groceries. Then I got to one from Jake. "Hey, it's me," Jake's voice said through the phone speaker. "Just wanted to check in about the timeline. He's still planning to sign the retirement papers next week, right? After that, we're finally free of him." I stared at the phone. Free of him? Free of who? I played the next voicemail. It was Carla's voice, but it was a message she'd left for Jake. "Got your message," she said. "Yes, he's definitely signing next week. He's so excited about retiring. Early that he hasn't asked any questions about the pension transfer. And good news, I can't pretend much longer, so the timing is perfect." My sandwich fell out of my hands and landed on the kitchen floor. They were talking about me, about my retirement, about pretending something. I played the next message. Jake. Again. Perfect. "My lawyer says once he signs those papers, the pension fund transfer will be irreversible. And since you're listed as the beneficiary with power of attorney, you'll have complete control over the accounts." Power of attorney? When did Carla get power of attorney over my pension? I kept playing messages, and each one made me feel sicker. Carla's voice. "I've been forging his signature on the financial documents for months. He trusts me so much with the paperwork that he doesn't even read what he's signing anymore." Jake's voice. "Once this goes through, we can finally be together without having to sneak around. And with his pension money, we won't have to worry about my business struggling anymore." Together? Jake and Carla were together? I sat down hard in one of our kitchen chairs, still holding the phone. There were dozens of these messages. Going back months. My wife and my best friend planning to steal my pension and run away together, and I'd been completely clueless. The worst part was how detailed their plan was. They'd been working on this for over a year. Jake's construction business was apparently in serious financial trouble. He owed money to suppliers, contractors, even the IRS. He was facing bankruptcy and potentially criminal charges for some of the corners he'd cut on recent projects. My pension money was supposed to be his way out, and Carla had been unhappy. In our marriage for years, according to these voicemails, she felt trapped, bored, tired of being married to someone she called boring old reliable Jim. That's me, by the way, Jim. Boring old reliable Jim. They'd been having an affair for at least 2 years, maybe longer. Meeting up while I was at work, taking weekend trips together while I thought Jake was visiting his sister in Phoenix. I'd even helped cover for him a few times, telling people he was out of town on business when they asked where he was. I'd been helping my best friend cheat with my wife without even knowing it. The retirement papers they kept talking about, those were documents that would allow me to access my pension early, but with penalties and tax implications that would reduce the total payout. Normally, I'd wait until I was 65 to get the full amount, but Jake had convinced me that taking early retirement was a great idea. "You're burned out, man," he'd said just last week. "Why wait 3 more years when you can start enjoying life now?" I thought he was being a good friend, looking out for my happiness. Really, he was looking out for his bank account. The pension transfer documents that Carla had been getting me to sign without reading carefully would put all the money into an account that she controlled. Legally, as my wife and designated beneficiary, she'd have the right to manage the funds, and once she had control, she and Jake planned to disappear. I spent the rest of the afternoon listening to every voicemail on that phone. By the time I was done, I knew their entire plan. Jake was going to declare bankruptcy for his construction company next month. That would protect him from most of his business debts. Meanwhile, Carla would file for divorce, claiming that I'd become abusive and controlling in my old age. With the combination of bankruptcy protection and a sympathetic divorce story, they figured they could keep most of my pension money even. If I tried to fight them legally, they'd already picked out a house in Costa Rica where they planned to live. Jake had been learning Spanish, and Carla had been researching international banking laws. When Carla came home from her errands that evening, I was sitting in the living room watching TV like normal. The old phone was hidden in my workshop in the garage. "How'd the garage cleaning go?" she asked, giving me a kiss on the cheek. "Good," I said. "Made a lot of progress. Find anything interesting?" "Just a lot of old junk. Nothing worth keeping." That night, while Carla was asleep next to me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what to do. Part of me wanted to confront them immediately, storm into Jake's office the next morning, throw the phone on his desk, and demand an explanation. But the smarter part of me realized that if I did that, they'd just change their plan. Maybe accelerate it, maybe abandon it completely and try something else. Either way, I'd lose the advantage of knowing what they were up to. So I decided to play dumb, to act like the boring, trusting, reliable Jim they thought I was, while I figured out how to protect myself. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to my bank. I told them I wanted to review all my accounts and make sure everything was secure. That's when I discovered that Carla really had been forging my signature. There were documents I'd never seen before, giving her power of attorney over not just my pension, but my savings accounts, my life insurance, even my 401k. "When did I sign this?" I asked the bank manager, showing him one of the power of attorney forms. He checked his computer. "According to our records, you came in with your wife about 6 months ago. You signed all the paperwork in front of our notary." "I've never been in this office with my wife," I said. The bank manager looked confused. "That's unusual. Let me pull up the security footage from that day." 20 minutes later, we were watching security camera footage of someone who looked like me from behind, sitting next to Carla, signing documents. But when the person turned around, it clearly wasn't me. It was Jake, wearing a baseball cap and glasses, but definitely Jake. "This is identity fraud," the bank manager said. "We need to report this to the police immediately." "Not yet," I said. "I need to think about this." I spent the next week quietly gathering evidence. I made copies of all the forged documents. I went to other banks and discovered that they'd opened accounts in my name at 3 different institutions. Even hired a private investigator to follow Carla and Jake. Within 2 days, he had photos of them together at hotels, restaurants, even looking at real estate listings for houses in Costa Rica. But I didn't say anything to either of them. I just acted normal. Carla kept bringing me retirement paperwork to sign, and I kept signing it. But now I was reading everything carefully, and I was taking photos of each document before I handed it back to her. Jake kept talking about how great early retirement was going to be for me. "You're going to love having all that free time," said during one of our regular Wednesday night poker games. "No more deadlines, no more office politics, just freedom." "Yeah," I agreed. "Freedom sounds great." For 74 days, I played the role of the clueless husband and trusting friend. I smiled and nodded while they planned to steal my life savings. I made small talk about vacation plans while they researched houses in Central America. The hardest part was acting normal with Carla, kissing her goodbye in the mornings, asking about her day, pretending everything was fine while knowing she was counting down the days until she could disappear with my money and my best friend. But I used those 74 days to build an airtight case against them. I worked with my lawyer to set up new accounts that they couldn't access. I had all the forged documents analyzed by handwriting experts. I even got court orders to freeze certain accounts without them knowing about it. Most importantly, I changed my will and all my beneficiary designations. If something happened to me, Carla wouldn't get a penny. This morning was supposed to be the day. According to the messages I'd overheard, Jake was going to pick up Carla at our house at 10 a.m., and they were going to drive to the airport together. Their flight to Costa Rica was scheduled for 2 p.m., except when they showed up at our house. This morning, it was locked and empty. I'd moved out yesterday while Carla was at work, taking only my personal belongings and leaving no forwarding address. I'd also arranged for the bank to freeze all the accounts they thought they were going to access. Every single penny they'd been planning to steal was now locked up tight, and I'd left a little surprise for them on our kitchen table. A copy of every voicemail from Carla's old phone, along with copies of all the forged documents, and a note that said, "Thanks for the warning. Boring old reliable Jim." By now, they've probably realized that their plan has completely fallen apart. The police are looking for them based on the fraud charges I filed yesterday. Their bank accounts are frozen, and their flight to Costa Rica left without them. Jake's bankruptcy filing has been flagged as fraudulent, which means instead of protecting him from his debts, it's going to land him in federal prison. And Carla? Well, Carla is about to discover that divorcing someone who has recordings of you planning to commit pension fraud isn't going to work out the way she hoped. But here's the thing that really gets me. Yesterday afternoon, before I moved out, I got a call from Jake. "Hey, buddy," he said, sounding completely normal. "You excited about retirement? You're finally going to sign those papers tomorrow, right?" "Yeah," I said. "Can't wait." "You're a lucky man, Jim. Most people don't get to retire early with a beautiful wife and enough money to enjoy it." "You're right," I said. "I am lucky, and hey, Carla and I were talking. Maybe when you're settled into retirement, the three of us should take a trip together. You know, celebrate your new freedom." I almost laughed out loud. "That sounds great, Jake. Let's definitely plan something." Even after 18 months of planning to rob me blind, even knowing that I was going to sign the papers that would give them access to my money, Jake was still pretending to be my friend, still calling me buddy, still talking about how lucky I was. The man was planning to steal my retirement, run away with my wife, and leave me broke and alone. And he was acting like he was doing me a favor. That's when I realized that the betrayal wasn't just about the money. It wasn't even really about Carla, although that part hurt too. It was about the fact that Jake had looked me in the eye every week for 18 months, knowing he was planning to destroy my life, and had acted like nothing was different. He'd sat at my dinner table, borrowed my tools, asked me for advice about his business problems, the same business problems he was planning to solve by stealing from me. That takes a special kind of evil. But here's what Jake and Carla didn't count on. They thought I was just boring old reliable Jim who would never see it coming. They were half right. I am reliable. Reliable enough to spend 74 days building a case that's going to put them both in prison. This afternoon, I'm meeting with the FBI. Turns out pension fraud is a federal crime, especially when it involves forged documents and interstate banking violations. Agent Rodriguez, who's handling the case, says they're looking at charges that could carry 20-year sentences for both of them. "The evidence you've gathered is exceptional," she told me yesterday. "Most victims of this kind of fraud don't discover the scheme until after their money is gone. The fact that you caught them before they could complete this theft means we can charge them with conspiracy and attempted fraud, in addition to the identity theft and forgery charges." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we arrest them, and you get to keep your retirement fund. Tomorrow, I'm going to do something I've been thinking about for 74 days. I'm going to call Jake's sister in Phoenix, the sister he's supposedly been visiting all those weekends when he was really with my wife. I'm going to tell her exactly what her brother has been up to. And I'm going to ask her if she wants to testify about all the times Jake claimed to be visiting her when he was actually stealing from his best friend. Something tells me she's going to be very interested in helping with the prosecution. But you know what the weirdest part of this whole thing is? I actually am looking forward to retirement now, not because I'm free from work stress, but because I'm free from fake friends and lying spouses. I've got my money, I've got my health, and I've got a clean slate to start over. And I've learned something important about myself. I might be boring and reliable, But I'm not stupid, and when someone tries to take advantage of boring, reliable people, they sometimes discover that reliable people are very, very good at planning ahead. Jake and Carla spent 18 months planning to steal from me. I spent 74 days planning to stop them. Guess who had the better plan? The twist that changes everything. But wait, this story has one more chapter that I only found out about 3 days ago, and it changes everything I thought I knew about what Jake and Carla were really up to. Remember how I said I hired a private investigator to follow them? Well, 3 days ago, Detective Walsh called me with some information that I wasn't expecting. "Jim," he said, "I think there's something else you need to know about this case." "What do you mean?" "I've been looking into Jake's financial situation more deeply, and I found something interesting. His construction company isn't just struggling. It's been a front for money laundering for the past 5 years. Money laundering? I thought Jake was just bad at business. What kind of money laundering? Drug money mostly. Small amounts, but consistent. Jake's been using his construction projects to clean cash for a local dealer named Eddie Vasquez. I'd never heard of Eddie Vasquez, but Detective Walsh explained that he was part of a larger drug distribution network that operated throughout our state. The thing is, Walsh continued, Jake owes Vasquez about $200,000. Not for drugs, but for money that Jake was supposed to launder but instead used to cover his business expenses. So Jake stole from drug dealers? Essentially, yes. And Vasquez has been putting pressure on Jake to pay up. Serious pressure. How serious? The kind where people end up in hospital emergency rooms, or worse. Suddenly, Jake's desperation to get his hands on my pension money made a lot more sense. He wasn't just trying to save his business or fund a retirement getaway with my wife. He was trying to avoid getting killed by drug dealers. There's more, Walsh said. I think your wife might not be as willing a participant in this scheme as those voicemails made it sound. What do you mean? I've been watching them for weeks, and Carla's behavior doesn't match someone who's excited about running away with her lover. She looks scared, Jim. Really scared. Scared of what? I think she's scared of Jake, and I think Jake has been threatening her to keep her involved in the plan. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the interactions I'd had with Carla over the past few months, looking for signs that she was being coerced instead of being a willing conspirator. The more I thought about it, the more things started to make sense. Carla had been acting strange lately, but not in the way someone acts when they're excited about starting a new life. She'd been nervous, jumpy, distracted. She'd been losing weight and having trouble sleeping. I'd assumed she was feeling guilty about betraying me. But what if she was feeling scared about what Jake might do if she didn't cooperate? The next morning, I called Detective Walsh back. "I want to talk to Carla," I said. "Before you arrest her, I think there's more to this story." "That's not a good idea, Jim. She's still technically a suspect in a federal fraud case. What if she's a victim instead of a suspect?" "What do you mean? What if Jake has been threatening her? What if he forced her to participate in this scheme?" Detective Walsh was quiet for a moment. That would change things significantly. "But we'd need evidence. Let me talk to her. Let me see if I can get her to tell me the truth." It took some convincing, but Detective Walsh agreed to let me meet with Carla under controlled circumstances. They would be listening to everything, and they'd intervene if things got dangerous. Yesterday afternoon, I met Carla at a coffee shop downtown. She looked terrible, pale, thin, dark circles under her eyes. She also looked surprised to see me. "Jim, what are you doing here? I thought you were at work." "I took the day off," I said, sitting down across from her. "We need to talk." Carla's face went white. "Talk about what?" "About Jake, about the pension fraud, about all of it." She started to get up from the table, but I reached across and grabbed her hand. "Carla, I know about the plan. I know about the forged documents, the power of attorney, the accounts in Costa Rica. I know everything." She started crying immediately. Not the tears of someone who'd been caught, but the tears of someone who was relieved that a secret was finally out. "Jim, I'm so sorry," she said. "I never wanted to hurt you. I tried to stop it, but Jake said he'd kill you if I didn't cooperate. He threatened to kill me. He said he had connections with dangerous people who would hurt you if I didn't, help him get the money he needed." "How long has this been going on?" 2 years, maybe longer. It started when Jake's business got in trouble and he asked me to help him figure out your financial situation. Just basic stuff, he said. "How much you made when you were planning to retire?" "And you told him?" "I thought I was helping a friend. You always said Jake was like a brother to you, so I figured it was okay to share family information with him." "When did it turn into fraud?" "Gradually. First he asked me to get copies of your bank statements. Then he wanted me to find out about your pension benefits. Each time he said it was just so he could give you better financial advice." "And the affair?" Carla's face crumpled. "There was no affair, Jim. Jake made me pretend there was one. He said if you thought I was cheating, you'd be more likely to sign divorce papers quickly, and that would make it easier to access your accounts. But the voicemails, he made me leave those messages. He said if anyone ever investigated, they needed to believe that I was a willing participant. That way, if we got caught, I'd go to prison instead of him. I stared at my wife across the coffee shop table. So you never wanted to leave me? Never. Jim, I love you. I've been trying to find a way to warn you without getting you killed. That's why I've been so distant lately. I was terrified that Jake would figure out that I was having second thoughts. Why didn't you just tell me what was happening? Because Jake showed me pictures of what happens to people who cross Eddie Vasquez. And he said, you'd try to be a hero and confront them, and they'd kill you for it. We talked for 2 more hours. Carla told me everything. How Jake had gradually manipulated her into helping with small pieces of the fraud. How he'd convinced her that I was in danger if she didn't cooperate. How he'd forced her to practice forging my signature until she could do it perfectly. Most importantly, she told me about Eddie Vasquez and his associates, and how Jake owed them money from a money laundering operation gone wrong. Jake's been telling everyone that he's leaving the country because he wants to retire, Carla said. But really, he's running from people who want to kill him, and he was planning to take you down with him. What do you mean? Once Jake got your pension money and disappeared, Vasquez's people would come looking for him. When they couldn't find Jake, they'd start looking at his associates. That includes you, Jim. They'd assume you were part of the money laundering operation. I felt sick. Jake hadn't just been planning to steal my retirement money. He'd been planning to frame me for his criminal activities. We have to stop him, I said. How? If we go to the police and Jake finds out, he'll tell Vasquez that we're cooperating with law enforcement. Then we're both dead. Jake's already been arrested, I said quietly. Carla's eyes went wide. What? This morning, FBI picked him up at his office. They have evidence of the pension fraud, the forged documents, all of it. But that means Eddie Vasquez is going to come looking for answers. And he's going to start with you and me. That's when Detective Walsh and 2 FBI agents walked into the coffee shop. Mrs. Johnson, Agent Rodriguez said, sitting down next to Carla. We've been listening to your conversation. We'd like to offer you protective custody in exchange for your cooperation in our investigation of both Jake Miller and Eddie Vasquez. Protective custody? We've been investigating Vasquez's operation for 3 years. Agent Rodriguez explained. Jake's arrest this morning gives us an opportunity to move against the entire network, but we need insider information about how the money laundering worked. I don't know anything about money laundering, Carla said. You know more than you think. Jake used his construction projects to clean drug money, and you helped him with the paperwork for those projects. Your testimony could help us convict not just Jake, but Vasquez and 12 other people in his organization. What about Jim? Carla asked. Is he safe? As long as Vasquez thinks Jim might have been involved in Jake's operation, no. But if we can convince Vasquez that Jim was just an innocent victim, then yes. How do we convince him of that? Agent Rodriguez smiled. By letting him know that Jim is the one who turned Jake into the FBI. So that's what we did. 3 days ago, we staged a very public arrest of Carla at our house, with me standing on the front lawn yelling about how I'd been betrayed by my wife and my best friend. The whole neighborhood saw it. And more importantly, Eddie Vasquez's people saw it. As far as the criminal underworld is concerned, boring old reliable Jim is the guy who caught his wife and best friend stealing from him and turned them into the authorities. I'm not a criminal. I'm a victim who got justice. Carla is currently in protective custody, helping the FBI build their case against Jake and Vasquez. Once the trials are over, assuming we both survive that long, she'll be able to come home. We'll have to rebuild our marriage, obviously. 18 months of lies and fear and forced betrayal doesn't just disappear overnight, but we'll rebuild it as equals this time, as partners who trust each other enough to face problems together instead of trying to handle them alone. And Jake? Jake is looking at 40 years in federal prison on charges ranging from pension fraud to money laundering to conspiracy to commit murder. Turns out when you owe money to drug dealers and plan to frame your best friend for your crimes, the FBI takes a very dim view of your retirement plans. But here's the thing that really gets me about this whole situation. I spent 74 days thinking my wife and my best friend had betrayed me for money and love. Really, my best friend had terrorized my wife into helping him steal money to pay off drug dealers who were threatening to kill him. Carla wasn't planning to run away with Jake. She was planning to run away from him, and I almost let the FBI arrest her as a willing accomplice to fraud instead of recognizing her as a victim of extortion and intimidation. Sometimes the people you think are betraying you are actually trying to protect you in the only way they know how. And sometimes the person you think is your best friend is actually your worst enemy, and everyone else is just collateral damage in their plan to save themselves. I'm just grateful that boring old reliable Jim was smart enough to gather evidence before making accusations, because it turns out the evidence tells a very different story than the one you hear when you're listening to voicemails that were recorded under duress. The truth is always more complicated than it seems, but it's also always worth finding. Update number 1, the witness protection nightmare. But this story took a turn I never saw coming. About 3 weeks after Carla entered witness protection, I got a call that changed everything. It was Agent Rodriguez, and she sounded panicked. "Jim, we have a problem. A big problem." "What kind of problem?" "Someone leaked information about Carla's location. Eddie Vasquez knows where she is." My blood went cold. "How is that possible?" "We're still investigating, but it looks like someone in the U.S. Marshal's office has been feeding information to Vasquez's organization. We need to move Carla immediately." "Where?" "That's the problem. We don't know where it's safe to move her. If we have a leak in the system, nowhere in witness protection is secure." I sat down hard in my kitchen chair. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying we might need to consider alternative protection arrangements." "Like what?" "Like you and Carla disappearing completely. New identities, new location, new life permanently." I stared out my kitchen window at the neighborhood I'd lived in for 15 years, at the house where Carla and I had built our life together. "For how long?" "Forever, Jim. If Vasquez's people find you, they'll kill you both, not just to keep you from testifying, but to send a message to anyone else who might think about cooperating with law enforcement." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what it would mean to disappear forever, to leave everything behind and become someone else. But then I thought about Carla, hiding in some safe house, knowing that people were actively trying to kill her because she'd tried to protect me from Jake's schemes. The next morning, I called Agent Rodriguez back. "I'll do it," I said. "Whatever it takes to keep Carla safe." "Jim, you need to understand what you're agreeing to. New identity means no contact with anyone from your old life. Ever. Your family, your friends, your co-workers. You'll never see any of them again." "I understand. And there's no guarantee it'll work. Vasquez has connections everywhere. Even with new identities, you might not be safe." "What's the alternative?" Agent Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. "The alternative is we try to take down Vasquez's entire organization before they find you. But that could take years, and there's no guarantee we'll succeed." "How long do I have to decide?" 12 hours. "We're moving Carla again tonight, and we need to know if you're coming with her." I spent those 12 hours thinking about everything I'd be giving up. My job, my house, my retirement plans, my parents, who were 83 and 85 and probably wouldn't live long enough to see me again if I disappeared. But I also thought about the conversation I'd had with Carla at the coffee shop, about how scared she'd been for months, and how she'd been trying to protect me the only way she knew how. If our positions were reversed, she'd disappear with me without hesitation. That night, I packed one suitcase with clothes and personal items. I left a letter for my parents explaining that I had to go away for a while, but that I loved them. I arranged for my neighbor to take care of my house and car, and then I got into an unmarked FBI van and disappeared. For the next 6 months, Carla and I lived in a small apartment in a city I can't name, under names that weren't ours, working. Jobs that paid minimum wage and kept us invisible. It was the hardest 6 months of my life, but also the most important, because for the first time since this whole nightmare started, Carla and I were truly honest with each other about the fear, the guilt, the anger, the love that had kept us together through everything. "I know you gave up your whole life to protect me," she said one night as we sat on the couch in our tiny living room. "You gave up your whole life to protect me first," I said. "For 18 months. That was different. I had to do that, and I had to do this." We learned how to be married again during those 6 months. Not the comfortable routine marriage we'd had before, but a partnership between two people who'd been through hell together and come out the other side. The breakthrough came when Agent Rodriguez called with news about the investigation. "We got him," she said. "Eddie Vasquez and 14 members of his organization were arrested this morning. The leak in the Marshal's office has been identified and arrested too." "What does that mean for us?" "It means you can come home if you want to." "If we want to?" "Jim, you and Carla have been through something that most people never experience. Some witness protection participants choose to stay in their new identities even after the threat is eliminated. It's a chance to start completely over." That night, Carla and I talked until dawn about what we wanted to do. "I miss our old life," she said, "but I also like who we've become in this new one." "What do you mean?" "I mean we talk to each other now, really talk, about everything. We didn't do that before." She was right. Our old marriage had been comfortable but superficial. We'd lived parallel lives in the same house, making polite conversation about work and weather and weekend plans. Our new marriage was built on shared trauma, mutual protection, and complete honesty. It was harder, but it was also deeper. So what? Do you want to do? I asked. I want to go home, Carla said, but I want to take this version of us with us. We decided to return to our old life, but with new rules. Complete honesty, always. No major decisions made alone. No secrets, no matter how small. When we got back to our house, it felt like visiting a museum of our old life. Everything was exactly the same, but we were completely different people. I went back to my engineering job, but I also started volunteering with a victims' rights organization, helping other people who'd been targeted by financial fraud. Carla started seeing a therapist to work through the trauma of being coerced and threatened for 18 months. She also started a support group for spouses of criminal defendants. And Jake pled guilty to everything in exchange for a 30-year sentence instead of life in prison. He also agreed to testify against other members of Vasquez's money laundering network. I never saw him again, but I heard from his lawyer that Jake wanted to apologize to me and Carla. We both declined to meet with him. Some apologies aren't worth hearing. But the strangest part of coming home was dealing with all the people who thought they knew what had happened to us. Our neighbors, our families, our co-workers, they all knew that Carla had been arrested for fraud, then released, then disappeared for 6 months. But they didn't know about the witness protection, the drug dealers, or the threats. As far as everyone else was concerned, my wife had tried to steal my pension with my best friend, gotten caught, and then we'd mysteriously reconciled and moved away for a while. People had opinions about that, strong opinions. I can't believe you took her back, my brother said during our first family dinner after we returned. She tried to steal your retirement. It's complicated, I said. How is fraud complicated? I couldn't explain that Carla had been protecting me from criminals who would have killed us both. That information was still classified as part of an ongoing federal investigation. So I just said, marriage is complicated. Some people understood. Most people didn't. We lost a lot of friends during those first few months back home. People who couldn't reconcile the story they thought they knew with the couple they saw in front of them. But we also made new friends. People from the victims' rights organization, people from Carla's support group, people who understood that sometimes the most important thing in a relationship isn't what you've been through, but how you've grown from it. A year after we came home, Carla and I renewed our wedding vows, not because we needed to prove anything to anyone else, but because we wanted to make promises to each other based on who we'd become, not who we'd been. I promise to trust you even when I'm scared, Carla said during the ceremony. I promise to protect you even when it means giving up everything else, I said. It was a small ceremony. Just our immediate families and a few close friends, the people who'd stood by us when they didn't understand what was happening, and who celebrated with us when we couldn't explain why we were celebrating. But the real victory came 2 years later, when Agent Rodriguez called with the final update on the case. Vasquez got life in prison, she said. No possibility of parole, and his entire organization has been dismantled. What about the other people, the ones who were supposed to kill us? All in prison or dead. Jim, you and Carla are completely safe now. The threat is over. That night, we sat in our kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd first listened to those voicemails on Carla's old phone, and talked about what it meant to be truly free. Do you ever regret it? Carla asked. Giving up your retirement, going into witness protection, losing all those friendships? Never, I said. Do you regret not running away with Jake when you had the chance? Carla laughed. Jake was never an option. I was never running away with him. I was running away from him. Where were you planning to go? I was planning to come find you and tell you the truth. That was always the plan, Jim. I just needed to figure out how to do it without getting you killed. And now we're both alive, we're both free, and we're both married to our best friend. She was right. The person I'd thought was my best friend had turned out to be my worst enemy. But the person I'd thought was betraying me had turned out to be the best friend I'd ever had. Sometimes it takes almost losing everything to realize what you actually have. And sometimes the people who seem like your enemies are actually fighting the same battle you are, just from a different position. I learned that boring, reliable people can be a lot more resilient than anyone expects. But I also learned that resilience isn't about going through difficult things alone. It's about finding people who'll go through difficult things with you and holding on to them no matter what happens. That old phone in the garage didn't just reveal a conspiracy against me. It revealed that the person I thought I knew best was actually a stranger, and the person I thought was a stranger was actually the love of my life. And that's a lesson worth more than any retirement fund anyone could ever steal. Update. Number 2. The shocking family connection. But just when I thought this nightmare was finally over, I discovered something that made everything I'd been through look like a warm-up act. This happened about 3 years after Vasquez got sentenced. Carla and I were settled back into our normal life. The victims' rights work was going well, and we'd finally started planning for my actual retirement. Then my dad had a stroke. It wasn't life-threatening, but it was serious enough that he needed to be in the hospital for a few weeks. While he was recovering, my mom asked me to help her organize his home office so she could handle their finances while he was incapacitated. "Your father keeps everything," she said, showing me boxes of old tax returns and business records going back decades. I can't find anything current in all this mess. I spent a Saturday afternoon sorting through Dad's filing system, which was basically no system at all. Bank statements mixed with insurance policies mixed with random receipts from 20 years. That's when I found a folder labeled Jake Miller Business Loan. My stomach dropped. My dad had loaned money to Jake? When? And why hadn't anyone mentioned it? Inside the folder were documents showing that my father had loaned Jake $50,000 3 years ago. Right around the time Jake's construction business started having serious financial problems. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the promissory note Jake had signed. According to the document, if Jake couldn't repay the loan, my father would have the right to claim ownership of Jake's business assets. And if Jake died or was incarcerated, the debt would transfer to his next of kin. Jake's next of kin was listed as his sister in Phoenix. The sister he'd supposedly been visiting all those weekends when he was actually with my wife. Except according to these documents, Jake didn't have a sister in Phoenix. His next of kin was listed as Jennifer Miller, his daughter. Jake had a daughter I'd never heard of. I called my mom into the office. "Did you know Dad loaned money to Jake?" "Oh, yes," she said casually. "Jake needed help with his business a few years ago. Your father felt bad for him, especially after Jake's wife died." "Jake's wife died? You didn't know?" "It was about 4 years ago. Cancer, I think. Very sad. Jake was left alone with their little girl." I stared at my mother. "Jake has a daughter?" "Well, she's not so little anymore. Must be about 16 or 17 now. Sweet girl. Jake brings her to the company picnic every year." "Mom, I've never seen Jake with a daughter at any company picnic." "Of course you have, dear. Jennifer, pretty blonde girl, very quiet. She usually hangs around the food table." I thought back to every company picnic I'd attended in the past 5 years. I remembered seeing a teenage girl at those events, but I'd always assumed she belonged to one of my other coworkers. "Mom, are you telling me that Jake has been raising a teenage daughter by himself this whole time, and I never knew about it?" "Well, you men don't really pay attention to family details, do you?" That evening, I called Agent Rodriguez. "I need to ask you something about Jake Miller," I said. "Does he have a daughter?" "Yes. Jennifer Miller, age 17. She's been in foster care since Jake's arrest." "Why? Foster care? What about other family members?" "According to our records, Jake has no living relatives. His parents are dead, he was an only child, and his wife died of cancer 4 years ago. But Jake always said he was visiting his sister in Phoenix." "Jake lied about a lot of things, Jim. There is no sister in Phoenix. When he said he was visiting family, he was either with your wife or conducting business for Vasquez." "What about his daughter? Where was she during all this?" "Jennifer was staying with neighbors and family friends most weekends. Jake told her he was working construction jobs out of town." I felt sick. While Jake was manipulating my wife and planning to steal my pension, he was also lying to his teenage daughter about where he was spending his weekends. "Agent Rodriguez, there's something else. My father loaned Jake $50,000 and, according to the paperwork, if Jake can't repay it, the debt transfers to his daughter. That's problematic." "Why?" "Because Jake used that $50,000 as part of his money laundering operation, which means your father's loan is now considered proceeds from criminal activity." "What does that mean for my dad?" "It means we need to talk." The next day, Agent Rodriguez came to my parents' house to explain the situation. It was one of the most difficult conversations I've ever had to sit through. "Mr. Johnson," she said to my father, who was still weak from his stroke, "the money you loaned to Jake Miller was used to facilitate drug trafficking and money laundering operations." "That's impossible," Dad said. "Jake needed the money to buy construction equipment. He may have told you that, but bank records show that the money was immediately transferred to accounts controlled by Eddie Vasquez's organization. But Jake's a good boy. He's been friends with my son for 30 years. Agent Rodriguez looked at me, then back at my father. "Mr. Johnson, Jake Miller attempted to defraud your son of his entire retirement fund. He threatened to have your son killed if anyone interfered with his plans." My father stared at her in shock. "Jim, is this true?" "Yeah, Dad, it's true. But he seemed so concerned about your retirement. He kept saying you deserved to enjoy your golden years. He was planning to steal my golden years, Dad. The legal implications were complicated." Because my father had unknowingly provided funding for criminal activities, the government had the right to seize the loan documents and any collateral associated with them. But because my father was clearly an innocent victim, they weren't going to pursue criminal charges against him. However, Agent Rodriguez said, there is one complication. What kind of complication? Jake's daughter, Jennifer, has been asking questions about her father's business associates. She's been trying to figure out who might be able to help her financially now that she's in foster care. What kind of questions? She's been asking specifically about your family, Jim. She knows that her father had some kind of business relationship with your father, and she's wondering if that relationship might include any ongoing financial obligations. I looked at Agent Rodriguez. Are you saying Jake's daughter thinks my dad owes her money? I'm saying Jake's daughter is 17 years old, has no family, no money, and is trying to figure out how to survive until she turns 18 and ages out of the foster care system, and she thinks my dad might be able to help her. She doesn't know about the criminal aspects of her father's business. As far as she knows, her dad was a struggling contractor who had some business partnerships that might have included ongoing financial arrangements. That night, Carla and I had a long conversation about Jennifer Miller. She's just a kid, Carla said, and she's completely innocent in all of this. I know, but what can we do? We can't just give her money that legally doesn't belong to her. Maybe we can't give her money, but maybe we can give her something else. Like what? Like family. The next day, I called Agent Rodriguez back. I want to meet Jennifer Miller, I said. Jim, I don't think that's a good idea. She's been through enough trauma. I'm not going to tell her about her father's crimes. I just want to see if there's anything we can do to help her. What did you have in mind? I don't know yet, but she's 17 years old. And she's about to age out of foster care with no support system. Maybe there's a way to help her that doesn't involve giving her money. A week later, I met Jennifer Miller at a coffee shop near her foster home. She was exactly as my mother had described, pretty, blonde, and quiet, but she also looked tired and scared and much older than 17. Mr. Johnson, she said when I walked up to her table. You're Jim, right? My dad's friend? Yeah, I'm Jim, and I'm sorry about what happened to your dad. Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. I don't understand what he did wrong. The police won't tell me anything except that he's in prison for a long time. It's complicated, Jennifer. Everyone keeps saying that, but I'm not a little kid. I know my dad wasn't perfect, but he wasn't a bad person. He took care of me after Mom died. He worked hard. He tried to provide for us. I looked at this kid who had no idea that her father had threatened to have people killed, who believed that her dad was just a contractor who'd made some mistakes. What do you need right now? I asked. What would help you the most? I need to know that I'm going to be okay when I turn 18 next year. I need to know that I can go to college or get a job or just have a normal life. What do you want to study? Engineering, maybe. Like you. My dad always said you were really smart and that you helped him figure out complicated construction problems. I almost choked on my coffee. Even in prison, Jake was still lying to his daughter about our relationship. Jennifer, I need to tell you something about your dad's business dealings. What about them? They weren't legitimate. Your dad was involved in some illegal activities, and that's why he's in prison. Jennifer's face went white. What kind of illegal activities? Financial fraud, money laundering. He was working with some very dangerous people, but the construction business was real, but your dad was using it to hide illegal money. Money that belonged to drug dealers. Jennifer stared at me for a long moment. Then she said, how long have you known this? About 3 years. And you never told me? I never knew you existed until last week. That stopped her short. What do you mean you didn't know I existed? Your dad never mentioned having a daughter. In 30 years of friendship, he never once talked about you. Jennifer started crying then. Not just tears, but deep, gut-wrenching sobs. He was ashamed of me, she said. No, Jennifer, he wasn't ashamed of you. He was protecting you from the people he was involved with. If they'd known about you, you would have been in danger. So what happens to me now? Now you get to decide what kind of person you want to be. You're not responsible for your father's choices, but you are responsible for your own. Over the next hour, I told Jennifer everything I could about her father's crimes without revealing details that might put her in danger. I told her about the money laundering, about the threats, about how her father had tried to steal from my family. I hate him, she said when I finished. You don't have to hate him, but you don't have to make excuses for him either. What should I do? You should finish high school, go to college, and build a life that has nothing to do with anything your father did. How? I don't have any money, I don't have any family, I don't even have a place to live after I turn 18. That's when I made a decision that changed everything. What if you did have family? I said. What do you mean? What if Carla and I helped you? Not financially, because we can't give you money that legally belongs to the government, but what if we helped you apply for scholarships, find a job, get into college? Why would you do that? Because you're 17 years old and you deserve a chance to build a good life. regardless of what your father did. But your family is the family my dad hurt the most. Exactly. Which means we're the ones who understand best what it's like to have your life turned upside down by someone else's bad choices. Jennifer looked at me with the same expression Carla had had that day in the coffee shop when I told her I knew about Jake's plan. Relief mixed with disbelief. You'd really help me? We'd really help you. That was 2 years ago. Jennifer is now 19, a sophomore at the State University studying engineering, and she works part-time at the Victims' Rights Organization where I volunteer. She's also become like a daughter to Carla and me. Not legally. We never adopted her or anything formal like that. But emotionally, practically, in all the ways that matter. She calls us Jim and Carla, not Mom and Dad, but she spends holidays with us, comes to us for advice about school and relationships and career decisions, and treats our house like her home base. Do you ever regret it? Carla asked me last month. Taking responsibility for Jake's daughter? Never, I said. Do you? The opposite. I think helping Jennifer might be the best thing we've ever done. She's right. Jennifer is smart, funny, hardworking, and completely different from her father in every way that matters. She's studying to become a civil engineer, and she wants to design buildings that help people instead of hiding illegal activities. But the most amazing thing about Jennifer is how she's helped Carla and me heal from what Jake did to us. For years after the whole conspiracy was revealed, we carried around anger and betrayal and confusion about how someone we'd trusted could have hurt us so badly. But seeing Jennifer, seeing Jake's daughter grow into a good person despite everything he'd put her through, helped us realize that people aren't defined by their worst actions or by the worst actions of their families. Jennifer didn't choose her father, just like we didn't choose to be victims of his schemes. But all three of us chose how to respond to the situation we found ourselves in. We chose to build something good out of something terrible. And now, when people ask me about the pension fraud and the money laundering and all the drama with Jake and Carla and witness protection, I tell them it's a long story with a lot of complicated parts, but the ending is simple. My fake best friend tried to destroy my real family and accidentally gave us the daughter we never knew we wanted. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the best discoveries, and sometimes the people who seem like they have nothing to do with your story end up becoming the most important characters in it. Update number 3, the prison confession. But this story has one final twist that I never saw coming. And it happened just 6 months ago when I got a call that changed everything I thought I knew about Jake's motivations. The call came from Warden Phillips at the federal prison where Jake was serving his sentence. "Mr. Johnson," he said, "Jake Miller has been asking to speak with you. He says he has information about your case that you need to hear. I'm not interested in talking to Jake. I understand, but he's dying, Mr. Johnson. Pancreatic cancer. The doctors say he has maybe 2 months left." I sat down hard in my kitchen chair, the same chair where I'd sat 5 years ago listening to voicemails that revealed Jake's conspiracy. Why does he want to talk to me? He says there are things about what happened that you don't know. Things that might change how you feel about the people involved. What kind of things? He wouldn't tell me. He said he'd only talk to you. That night, Carla and I had a long conversation about whether I should visit Jake in prison. "You don't owe him anything," she said. "After everything he put us through, you don't owe him a deathbed conversation." I know, but what if he knows? Something that could help other people? What if there are more victims we don't know about? What if he's just trying to manipulate you one more time? She had a point. Jake had been manipulating people his entire life. Why would dying change that? But something about the warden's call bothered me. Jake had specifically said there were things I didn't know about the people involved. What people? Everyone involved in the conspiracy was already in prison or dead. 2 weeks later, I drove 3 hours to the federal prison where Jake was being held. I'd never been inside a prison before, and the whole experience was surreal. Jake looked terrible. The cancer had taken at least 50 pounds off him. His skin was gray, and he moved like an old man even though he was only 56. "Jim," he said when I sat down across from him in the visiting room. "Thank you for coming," the warden said. "You had information I needed to hear." "I do, but first I need to apologize." "I'm not here for apologies, Jake." "I know, but I need to say it anyway. What I did to you and Carla was unforgivable. I destroyed our friendship. I terrorized your wife. I tried to steal your future. There's no excuse for any of it. I looked at this man who'd been my best friend for 30 years and tried to feel something other than disgust. But I couldn't. Is that what you wanted to tell me? No. What I wanted to tell you is that everything you think you know about why I did what I did is wrong." "What do you mean?" Jake leaned forward. "I mean, Eddie Vasquez never threatened to kill me if I didn't pay him back." I stared at him. "What?" There was no deadline, no violence, no fear for my life. I owed him money, yes, but he was willing to work with me on a payment plan. Then why did you try to steal my pension? Because I was greedy. Because I wanted out of the construction business and into something bigger. Because I thought your pension money could fund a new life for me and Jennifer. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. So you lied about being threatened? I lied about everything, Jim. The threats, the danger, the desperation. I made Carla think that drug dealers were going to kill you if she didn't help me. Steal your money. But why? Why make up all that drama when you could have just asked me for help? Jake laughed bitterly. Because you never would have given me $50,000 to start a new business. You're too responsible, too careful, but you would do anything to protect your wife. So you terrorized Carla for months just to make the theft seem more justified? I terrorized Carla because scared people don't ask questions. If she thought you were in danger, she'd do whatever I told her to do without thinking about whether it made sense. I was quiet for a long moment, processing what Jake was telling me. Jake, do you understand what you're saying? You're telling me that Carla went through 18 months of hell because you wanted to manipulate her into helping you steal from me. Yes. And there was never any real danger? There was danger from Vasquez's people, but not the kind of immediate kill you tomorrow danger I made Carla believe in. What about the money laundering? Was that real? That was real, but it was small-time stuff. And Vasquez was more interested in keeping me as a long-term asset than in killing me over a few missed payments. I stood up from the table. I need to leave. Jim, wait. There's more. I don't want to hear more. You need to hear this. It's about your father. I sat back down. What about my father? The loan your father gave me? I never asked him for that money. What do you mean? I mean your father offered to loan me money after he overheard you and Carla talking about my business problems. You never knew about the loan because your father wanted it to be a secret. Why? Would he want it to be a secret? Because he was trying to help me without making you feel obligated to help me yourself. Your father thought I was a good friend who was going through a rough patch, and he wanted to help without putting pressure on you. I felt sick. My father had secretly loaned money to Jake because he thought Jake was a good friend who deserved help. Jake, my father had a stroke partly because of the stress from finding out about your crimes. The guilt of having unknowingly funded criminal activity has been eating him alive. I know, and I'm sorry about that too. Sorry doesn't undo the damage. No, it doesn't. But there's something else you need to know about your father's loan. What? I never used that money for money laundering. I used it exactly the way I told your father I would, to buy construction equipment. Then how did the FBI trace it to Vasquez's accounts? Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he said, because I lied to the FBI too. What? When I got arrested, I was facing life in prison. My lawyer told me that the only way to get a reduced sentence was to cooperate fully with the federal investigation. So you cooperated. So I over-cooperated. I told them that every dollar that went through my business was connected to money laundering, even when it wasn't. I figured the more valuable I made myself as a witness, the better deal I could get. You falsely implicated my father in money laundering to get a better plea deal? I falsely implicated everyone I could think of. Your father, some of my subcontractors, even a few clients who'd paid me in cash. I told the FBI that anyone who'd ever given me money was part of Vasquez's network. I was speechless. Not only had Jake terrorized my wife and tried to steal my pension, he'd also falsely accused my father of participating in criminal activities. Jake, do you have any idea what you've put my family through? I know, and I'm telling you all this because I want you to be able to clear your father's name. The money he loaned me was completely legitimate, and I want that on the record. Why? Why tell me this now? Because I'm dying, and I want to do one good thing before I go. Your father is a good man who tried to help someone he thought was his son's friend. He doesn't deserve to live with the guilt of thinking he funded criminal activity. What about Jennifer? Does she know any of this? Jennifer doesn't know anything about the real extent of my crimes. As far as she knows, I made some mistakes with business finances and got in over my head. We've been taking care of her, you know. Carla and I. Jake's eyes filled with tears. I know. Agent Rodriguez told me. I can't tell you how grateful I am. We didn't do it for you. I know that too. You did it because you're good people who saw a kid in trouble and decided to help. That's who you've always been, Jim. If that's who I've always been, why did you think I'd be okay with you stealing from me? Because I'd convinced myself that you had so much money you wouldn't miss it. And because I'd convinced myself that I deserved it more than you did. Why did you think you deserved it more? Jake was quiet for a long time. Then he said, because I was jealous of your life, your stable job, your good marriage, your retirement plan. I'd been struggling with the construction business for years while You just coasted along with your engineering degree and your steady paycheck. Coasted along? That's how it looked to me. You never seemed to worry about money or work or anything. You just lived your quiet little life while I was fighting to keep my business afloat. So you decided to steal my quiet little life? I decided to take what I thought you didn't appreciate. I looked at Jake sitting across from me in his prison uniform, dying of cancer, having destroyed every meaningful relationship in his life. Was it worth it? I asked. No, he said quietly. It wasn't worth any of it. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Then Jake said, "There's one more thing." "What?" "I want you to know that everything Carla did to help me, she did because she thought she was protecting you. Every forged signature, every lie to the bank, every fake document. She thought she was saving your life. I know that. And I want you to know that she never wanted to leave you. Not for a single day. The affair was completely fake. And she hated every minute of pretending to be in love with me. Why are you telling me this? Because I destroyed a lot of things. But I don't want to be responsible for destroying your marriage, too. Carla loves you, Jim. She always has. Don't let my lies about our fake relationship make you doubt that. When I got home that evening, I told Carla everything Jake had said. So there was never any real danger? She asked. Not the kind of immediate danger Jake made you believe in. And your father's loan was completely legitimate? Completely legitimate. Carla was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I'm not sure if that makes me feel better or worse." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I went through 18 months of terror thinking I was protecting you from drug dealers who wanted to kill you. And it turns out I was just being manipulated by a greedy friend who wanted to steal your money. Does it change how you feel about what you did? No. I'd do it again if I thought you were really in danger. But it makes me angry that Jake put me through all that fear for nothing." Me too. The next day, I called Agent Rodriguez and told her what Jake had revealed. "We'll need to interview him officially," she said. "But if what he's saying is true, it means we can clear your father of any connection to the money laundering operation. What about all the other people Jake falsely implicated? We'll have to review every case where Jake provided testimony. This could impact dozens of prosecutions. Will Jake get in more trouble for lying to the FBI? He's dying in federal prison, Jim. There's not much more trouble we can give him. Jake died 6 weeks after our conversation. Jennifer and I went to his funeral, a small, sad affair with only a handful of people in attendance. Are you okay?" I asked Jennifer as we stood by his grave. "I think so," she said. "I'm sad that he's dead, but I'm also relieved that all the lying is finally over." "What do you mean?" "I've known for years that my dad wasn't telling me the truth about his business. I just didn't know how bad it really was." "How much did you know?" "I knew he was working with dangerous people. I knew he was scared a lot of the time. And I knew he was planning something that involved your family." I stared at her. "You knew about the plan to steal my pension?" "Not the details, but I knew he was obsessed with your retirement money, and I knew he was spending a lot of time with Carla when you weren't around. Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I was 17 years old and I was scared of what would happen to me if my dad went to prison. I thought if I just kept quiet, maybe everything would work out somehow." "Do you regret not saying anything?" Jennifer thought about it for a moment. "No," she said finally. "Because if I'd said something, you and Carla might not have gone through everything that made you strong enough to take care of me when I needed it." She was right. If Jennifer had warned us about Jake's plans, we might have stopped him before he'd committed serious crimes. But we also might not have learned how to trust each other completely, and we might not have been in a position to help Jennifer when she needed a family. Sometimes the worst experiences prepare you for the most important responsibilities. And sometimes the people who hurt you the most also teach you the most about what really matters. Jake taught me that friendship based on convenience and habit isn't real friendship, but he also taught me that family isn't just about blood relations or legal documents. Family is about the people who show up for each other when everything goes wrong. And by that definition, Carla, Jennifer, and I are more of a family than Jake and I ever were friends. The old phone in the garage revealed a conspiracy, but it also revealed something much more important. It revealed that love isn't about never being tested. It's about passing the tests you never saw coming. And we passed. Update, Murphy 4. The final revelation. But this story has one last chapter that happened just 3 months ago. And it's the most shocking revelation of all. Was cleaning out my dad's house after he passed away last year when I found something that changed everything I thought I knew about Jake's original plan. Hidden in an old shoebox in my dad's bedroom closet, I found a letter addressed to me. It was dated 5 years ago, right around the time I first discovered Jake's conspiracy. The letter was in my dad's handwriting. "Dear Jim," it began, "if you're reading this, it means I'm gone and you're going through my things. There's something I need to tell you about Jake Miller that I never had the courage to say while I was alive. My hands were shaking as I continued reading. 3 years before Jake got involved with those criminals, he came to me with a different kind of request. He wanted to borrow money to get you out of a situation that he said could destroy your life. I sat down hard on my dad's bed. What situation? Jake told me that you had a gambling problem. He said you owed money to dangerous people and that they were threatening to hurt you and Carla if you didn't pay up. He said you were too proud to ask for help, but that he could help you secretly if I loaned him the money to cover your debts. I stared at the letter in disbelief. Jake had told my father that I had a gambling problem? I know you'll be angry that I believed him instead of talking to you directly, but Jake seemed so concerned about your safety, and he had details about your financial situation that made his story believable. He knew about your bank accounts, your pension, even your weekly poker games with the guys from work. Of course, Jake knew about my financial situation. We'd been best friends for 30 years. I gave Jake the $50,000 because I thought I was saving your life. He told me that the dangerous people you owed money to would accept payment from a third party, and that once the debt was cleared, you'd never have to know how close you came to serious trouble. I kept reading, and each paragraph made me feel sicker. But after I gave Jake the money, things started seeming strange. He kept asking for more details about your finances. He wanted to know about your retirement plans, your pension benefits, even Carla's work situation. When I asked why he needed all that information, he said it was to make sure the dangerous people didn't target you again in the future. My father had been feeding Jake information about my family's finances for years because he thought he was protecting me from imaginary gambling debts. I started to get suspicious when Jake asked me to help him convince you to retire early. He said the dangerous people were still watching you and that the safest thing would be for you to take your pension money and move away from the area. When I told him that didn't make sense, he got angry and said I didn't understand how serious the situation was. That's when I realized Jake might not be telling me the truth. So I hired a private investigator to look into your supposed gambling debts. My dad had hired a private investigator, and I'd never known about it. The investigator found no evidence of gambling debts, dangerous people, or any threats against you or Carla. What he did find was evidence that Jake was in serious financial trouble and that he'd been asking other people in your social circle for information about your family's money. I confronted Jake about lying to me, and he admitted that there were no gambling debts, but he said he still needed the money to protect you from something else, something he couldn't tell me about because it would put you in danger if you knew. I didn't believe him anymore, but I also didn't know what to do with the information. I was ashamed that I'd been fooled so easily, and I was afraid that telling you about Jake's lies would damage your friendship unnecessarily. I decided to watch and wait to see what Jake was really planning. I hoped that maybe he'd come to his senses and return the money without ever involving you in whatever scheme he was hatching. But then I had my stroke, and by the time I recovered enough to think clearly, Jake had already been arrested and you'd been through that terrible ordeal with Carla and the witness protection. I wanted to tell you all of this while I was alive, but I was too ashamed of being manipulated by someone I'd trusted. I was also afraid that knowing about my role in Jake's access to your family might make you feel guilty about what happened to Carla. But I want you to know that Jake's ability to terrorize your wife and plan that elaborate theft scheme was partly my fault. I gave him money when he claimed you were in danger, and I gave him information about your finances when he claimed he needed it to protect you. I also want you to know that everything Jake told Carla about dangerous people wanting to hurt you was probably based on real information he'd gathered about actual criminals. Jake might have been lying about you owing them money, but the threats he described to Carla were probably real threats that he'd heard about through his own criminal associations. The letter continued for 2 more pages, with my father apologizing over and over for being deceived by Jake and for not warning me about what was happening, but the last paragraph was the most shocking of all. There's one more thing you need to know, Jim. About 6 months before Jake got arrested, he called me and said he wanted to confess everything and return the money he'd stolen. He said he'd realized that what he was planning would destroy too many innocent people and that he wanted to find a way to back out of it without getting anyone hurt. I told him he should talk to you directly, but he said it was too late for that. He said the criminals he was working with wouldn't let him back out, and that the only way to protect you and Carla was to go through with the plan, but make sure he got caught before any real damage was done. Jake asked me to make sure you found evidence of his plan in a way that would give you time to protect yourself. He suggested that you might accidentally discover something if you were looking through old documents or cleaning out storage areas. I stopped reading and thought about how I discovered Jake's plan. I'd been cleaning out the garage when I found Carla's old phone with the incriminating voicemails. Had Jake planned for me to find that phone? I went back to the letter. I don't know if Jake deliberately left that phone where you'd find it, but The timing seems too convenient to be completely accidental. I think Jake realized that his scheme had gotten too big and too dangerous, and that the only way to stop it was to make sure you discovered it before it was too late. I also think Jake's confession to you before he died was his final attempt to make sure you understood that he never wanted to hurt you or Carla. He destroyed your friendship and traumatized your family, but I believe he was trying to find a way to protect you from something even worse. I don't expect you to forgive Jake for what he did, but I want you to know that the man who was your friend for 30 years was still in there somewhere, trying to do the right thing, even when he was doing everything wrong. I love you, son. I'm proud of the way you protected your family and turned a terrible situation into something good. Take care of Carla and Jennifer, and don't spend too much time trying to understand why people do the things they do. Sometimes the only thing that matters is how you respond to what happens, not why it happened in the first place. Love, Dad. I sat in my father's empty bedroom for 2 hours reading and rereading that letter. If what my dad wrote was true, then Jake's entire criminal scheme had started as a misguided attempt to help me with a problem that didn't exist, and it had ended with Jake deliberately arranging for me to discover his plan before it could succeed. That evening, I showed the letter to Carla and Jennifer. So Jake wasn't just a greedy criminal, Jennifer said after reading it. He was a guy who made one lie to help a friend, then got in so deep with real criminals that he couldn't find a way out. Does that change how you feel about him? Carla asked. It makes me understand him better, Jennifer said. But it doesn't excuse what he put you through. What about you, Jim? Carla asked. Does it change how you feel? I thought about it for a long time. It makes the whole thing sadder, I said finally. But it doesn't change the fact that Jake made choices that hurt people we love. Do you think he really arranged for you to find that phone? I don't know, but I think it's possible. Why would he do that? Because maybe at the end, he remembered that we used to be friends. 3 months later, Jennifer graduated from college with a degree in civil engineering. She's starting a job next month with a firm that designs affordable housing for low-income families. At her graduation party, she gave a speech that mentioned how grateful she was to have a family that showed her how to build something good out of something broken. 5 years ago, she said, my father's worst decisions led to my meeting the best people I've ever known. I don't understand how that math works, but I'm grateful for it. After the party, Carla and I sat on our back deck, talking about everything we'd been through and everything we'd learned. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't found that phone? Carla asked. Sometimes, but not very often. Why not? Because wondering about what might have been is less interesting than appreciating what actually is. And what actually is? I looked at our house, where Jennifer was inside cleaning up after her graduation party. I thought about my dad's letter, about Jake's deathbed confession, about all the twists and turns that had brought us to this moment. What actually is, I said, is that we're all okay, we're all safe, and we're all together. Even though we lost so much along the way, we didn't lose anything that mattered. We lost things we thought mattered, but it turns out they didn't. Like what? Like the illusion that we could control what other people do. Like the belief that being careful means being safe. Like the idea that family is just about blood and marriage certificates. Carla was quiet for a moment. Then she said, what did we gain? We gained the knowledge that we can survive anything as long as we're honest with each other. We gained a daughter who teaches us something new about courage every day, and we gained the understanding that boring, reliable people are actually pretty amazing when they need to be. Is that enough? It's everything. Last week, Jennifer called to tell us she'd been promoted to project manager on her first major housing development. The project will provide homes for 200 families, including several families who are transitioning out of witness protection. It's like everything came full circle, she said. I'm helping people who've been through what we went through. You're helping people build new lives, I told her. We all are, she said. That's what we do now. We help people build new lives. She's right. That is what we do now. Carla runs a support group for families affected by financial crimes. I consult with the FBI on cases involving family fraud and coercion. Jennifer designs houses for people who need fresh starts. We turned the worst experience of our lives into the foundation for the best work we've ever done. And every time I walk past that garage where I found Carla's old phone, I think about how different our lives would be if I'd just thrown that phone away instead of charging it up. But I don't regret finding it, not even a little bit. Because that phone didn't just reveal a conspiracy. It revealed who we really were when everything we thought we knew got stripped away. And it turns out we're pretty good people who do pretty good work when we're working together. That's worth more than any retirement fund anyone could ever steal. And it's worth more than any friendship anyone could ever betray. Because real family doesn't abandon you when things get complicated. Real family shows up, tells the truth, and builds something better than what got broken. And that's exactly what we did.